Hello, everyone. I'm Landon Brooks with Heartlands Conservancy. And as you may know, if you follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our email newsletter or get our printed newsletter in the mail, we do have a Poag Sand Prairie challenge going on through the month of July. And so how that works is we got a grant from the Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation, which will triple your donation in July. So up to $7,000. So if we raise $7,000, we will get $21,000 from them to continue our restoration efforts of Poag Sand Prairie, which is a geological gem right here in southwestern Illinois. So what we're doing today, since a lot of people don't know what a sand prairie is or what Poag Sand Prairie is, but it is a very important habitat for some threatened species in our area, and we actually the site is used by Southern Illinois University Edwardsville researchers to conduct research about these threatened species. So what we are doing today is we are bringing two of the top researchers on the subject to you to kind of talk about their research findings at the site. So with that, I want to introduce you to those two researchers. We have Dr. Richard Essner and Katie Wiesehan from Southern Illinois University Edwardsville. How's it going, guys? Can you hear me?
Hey.
Hey.
How's it going?
Good. So why don't you go ahead and take some time to tell us more about your research?
I'm a IUE. I want a really interesting native species to Illinois, the Illinois coarse frog, for about 5 years. And
Hi, I'm Katie Wiesehan, and I'm a graduate student at SIUE. And Dr. Essner is my advisor, and I'm also working on the Illinois coarse frog.
So we're here today to just tell you a little bit about what your donation will accomplish. If you choose to donate to a very good project, the Poag Sand Prairie Restoration Project, you'll be doing a lot to preserve the biodiversity in the state of Illinois, in particular in this region. So today we're at the Poag Sand Prairie, which is in Edwardsville. It is adjacent to the SIUE campus in kind of the village of Poag in the American Bottoms. And it's a really interesting place. In terms of the habitat, we just don't really have anything like it around here anymore. A lot of it is of the sand prairie habitat has been destroyed by development. So we're really fortunate to have this really unique habitat remaining in southwestern Illinois. So sand prairie is probably, if you haven't been in one, you'll be really surprised when you see it. It's just unlike anything else that you're probably familiar with. When you walk on a sand prairie, the soil is basically like beach sand. Okay, so the reason that we have this is that Illinois, as you probably know, was underneath glaciers for a period of its history. So about 13,000 years or so ago, during the last glaciation, the glaciers retreated, and as those glaciers retreated, they, as they were advancing, they were grinding up all kinds of rock and creating sand and silt, and then that washed out of the glaciers as they melted, and they ended up flowing down into the Mississippi River. So in the process, they dumped large amounts of sand in various places near the Mississippi, and there are a number of species that make use of this unique soil type. So the species that we work on, the Illinois coarse frog, is just one of those that makes use of it, and they're really unusual amongst amphibians in that they burrow through this sand, just this beach sand, just like a mole. So they dig forelimbs first, and they're eating underground, and they spend almost their entire lives underground, only coming up above ground for a couple weeks in the springtime, in early spring to breed. and they'll travel long distances to do that. And that's one of the things that Katie's going to talk about is her research studying what they do when they're above ground during that short period of time. So really unique habitat. There are lots of unique plants that are found here. One of the things that people are often surprised about Illinois is that we have dead plants. We have prickly pear, for example. So the prickly pear cactus is found in the sand prairie, and some of the restoration work has gone towards kind of planting some of the things that should be here. Prickly pear has always been here, so it hadn't left, but we're trying to increase kind of that component of native sand prairie vegetation. So there have been some efforts to restore some of the cactus and milkweeds that we'll show you a little bit later. So there are also other animals. This area supports populations of kind of desert adapted lizards. So race runners are a really interesting species of lizard that you find here that you don't find elsewhere. Ornate box turtles are known to make use of this type of habitat and have been seen in this area periodically. So it's a really, really interesting place. But now I want to, before we kind of move on to talk a little bit about our conservation work, I would like to show you an Illinois chorus frog. So got one here, and I'm just going to uncover them. Burrowed down here pretty good. Oh, there we go. So it's got some sand on him. This is a male. I can tell it's a male because it's got a little dark throat patch. And yeah, wish I had some water to pour on him so you can see the patterning. But just really cute little frog. He's all covered up in sand right now. This is the biggest, the largest of the chorus frogs. Chorus frogs you might be familiar with from your backyard. They're really common backyard frogs, like the western chorus frog is this one that you hear in the springtime and early spring that makes a sound kind of like you're running your finger across a comb. So people hear it a lot. They probably don't know what it is, but they're common. These guys, however, are extremely rare. So they're only found in sand prairies where, again, they burrow and they spend most of their lives underground. They're only found in sand prairies, and we just don't have a lot of that habitat left. So in Illinois, they're basically found in southern Illinois, in this area of Madison County, where this area he's trying to burrow right now. This area is the only remaining population of Illinois chorus frogs in southwestern Illinois that's for sure been documented. There may be a population in Monroe County down by Valmeyer, but that is in some agricultural land, and we're not exactly sure of the status. There were populations in Granite City and South Roxana. Those have been wiped out by development. So this is basically all we have for this kind of central part of Illinois. And then we start to see them again when you go up the Illinois River. So there are some counties up north that have Illinois chorus frogs, but they're highly endangered. Or well, I shouldn't say highly endangered. They're considered threatened in the state of Illinois. They should be considered endangered at the federal level. They're actually a candidate species for federal listing. So that's being worked out right now, but hopefully they get some additional protection. So there you can see, like there he jumps. So he's got some pretty stout forelimbs that you can see he uses to burrow. Forelimbs first. I think if I put him in here, you can probably see him engaged in burrowing. It might take a little bit. So they're pretty good jumpers too. They travel long distances. Out there he goes. So you can see him burrowing into the sand. very good at that. So they travel long distances in the early spring. One of the big problems we have with Illinois chorus frogs is mortality, road mortality, because they travel across roads. They get hit by cars quite a bit. So this last year, I think, how many did we find, Katie? Probably, it was like maybe 100 or something like that. And the population is only estimated to be around maybe 400 adults. So it's a big hit on the population. So we're looking at ways to try to reduce road mortality as well. So there's the Illinois chorus frog, and I think with that, I think we'll kind of move on and talk about some conservation research that we're doing in our lab that Katie's heading up.
All right. So my thesis project is on the Illinois chorus frog, and I'm trying to estimate their population in this area. So basically how many frogs are left. And I do that with a mark recapture study. So I go out at night during the spring. Now their breeding season is over right now. So like you saw that guy at the beginning, he was pretty sluggish and tired and wasn't doing anything until we sort of woke him up. During the day and during the summer, fall, and winter, they are asleep, burrowed under the ground like that, and we don't really know what they do. Other researchers have found that they are eating while underground, but we're not sure how active they are, especially when it's really hot out in the summer and really cold in the winter. So the only time I have to study them is about 2 months in the spring. So March and April are great months to go out and find Illinois chorus frogs. So I'll come out here and into a couple of our other study areas where they have breeding ponds. And I'll basically walk around and listen for Illinois chorus frogs. And when I go to an area and I hear them or I see them, I catch them by hand. And I typically have undergraduate helper researchers out there with me. And this past year we caught so many frogs. It was great. And then I will scan them with the scanner. I actually brought my scanner with me if you guys are interested in that. And I will insert a microchip in them. And this microchip is really, really tiny, and it's just similar to a microchip you would put in a pet dog or cat to keep them from getting lost, or if they get lost, you can scan them, and they have a unique identifying code on them. So these frogs also have a microchip with that unique code. And so when I find one, I can scan it and see whether or not I found it before. And if I have found that frog before, that's a recapture. So I'm marking them and recapturing them. So I'm also looking for frogs that are on the road, because those frogs are traveling from areas like the Sand Prairie. This is, I guess we didn't go into it too much. They're hibernating in the Sand Prairie during the day, and during the summer, fall, and winter, they're burrowing underground. But then they have ponds, and there's actually a pond out here that we can walk toward in a little bit. And the pond is where they breed. So the male and female frogs go out there. The males are calling to attract female frogs, and they're breeding in these ponds. And what's really important is they need ephemeral ponds. They need ponds where there's no fish in them, and ponds that are close to the sand prairies. And a lot of these ponds and wetlands, along with the sand prairies, are being destroyed due to development or agricultural practices. So these habitats are really important to conserve, like we've already talked about how great it is to conserve this Poag Sand Prairie. And it's even better that there's a pond on site that I have heard and found Illinois chorus frogs using. So anyway, back to my study. I'm catching frogs, and then after I catch them and I mark them, I weigh them, measure how long they are, determine where they're male or female, mark their location where I found them, and then I release these frogs. And so the goal is to find frogs that I've already captured. So then I can see that same individual from, I started this last year, so 2019 to 2020, if they moved locations, if I find them early March versus late April or even May, and where this frog is, you can sort of map out their movements with that. You can map out migration routes. If I'm finding a lot of frogs on the road right in front of me, behind you guys, there's a road here, and I have found a couple frogs on the road heading toward the sand prairie and the pond. And so I'm still working on that data, but I'm building maps so that I can see where the frogs are going. And then in general, their population numbers, I have some data that I wrote down from my stuff from last year. And in 2019, we caught not as many frogs as we caught this year. In 2019, I only caught and tagged 73 individual frogs, which was actually quite a lot that I thought last year, because we were estimating the population to be around the last numbers that were taken. It's been over 10 years. I think it was 2008. They estimated about 200, a little over 200 individuals. So you're not going to be able to find every single frog that's living here. So finding 73 frogs, I thought that was pretty good. And I found 8 dead frogs. And these dead frogs, like Dr. Essner said, they're getting hit by cars on the road. So these frogs are out migrating on the road when it's raining. So it's really important, especially if you live in an area where there's ponds and wetlands, or even in the Edwardsville area, if you live here, to go really slow at night in the spring when it's raining. Because these roads are wet and the frogs will cross roads to travel, because they can travel up to a mile from sand prairie to pond or other habitat. So it's important. We're trying to find ways to reduce their road mortality. And then this year, I found even more frogs, but the sad part is I found even more dead frogs. So this year I found 61 frogs that were dead on the road that were hit by cars. They did not die from old age or getting eaten. They died solely due to getting hit by cars on the road. The good thing is I found 152 that were alive and that I tagged. So to me, before having all of the fancy statistics to back it up, I'm going to assume that the population is more than 200 individuals, considering we caught 152 and then 61 dead. That's already over 200. But if that high of a percent are dying each year, then it's really important to make sure they have good breeding habitat. They lay lots of eggs and lots of tadpoles survive. Because so many die each year, it's important that we conserve these areas so that more frogs can be born each year and that their numbers don't continue to decrease. But the exciting part is the recaptures, and this information is what I'm going to be able to use to get a more statistically robust estimate on the population. So last year, I said I caught 73 individuals and I caught 4 recaptures. So 4 it's a pretty low number for a recapture study, but it's still something that is good to show that the methods were working. I am able to recapture frogs, but that was last year. This year in 2020, I caught 152 frogs and only 6 recaptures. So if I had recaught a lot of frogs, then that would show the population numbers are maybe smaller, because I keep seeing the same guys. Like if you're going, well, I know coronavirus, we can't go do anything anywhere, but let's say you were at a concert and you knew half the people there. If you're going around, you keep seeing your friends that you know, versus if you keep seeing your strangers, the number of people you know will help determine how many people that you see. That doesn't make sense. I'm sorry.
No, that's good.
But anyway, I recaught 6 frogs this year in 2020, and 2 of those I had tagged last year. So that was really exciting to know that a frog that I tagged last year not only survived all summer, fall, and winter to spring 2020, but I found him again. And I haven't looked at, I'm pretty sure they were not in the same location. I was looking at this last night, but I didn't write it down. I still need to map all of the frogs out, but I'm finding them in a different location will help me determine where they're migrating. If one individual frog will always go, because we have multiple breeding ponds. If that frog always goes to the same pond each year, or if they're able to change their behavior and go to a pond here versus a pond, we found a new breeding location this year, and it's further south, it's a bit further away. So whether they can go between these areas or if they always go to the same place each year. So that's more information that we don't know, that hopefully I'll be able to, I might not be able to solve that mystery this year, but hopefully people like future researchers will be able to look into that. So more numbers. If you're a numbers person, you'll like this. But basically, it's easier for me to find male frogs. And you might think, well, why is that? The thing is that the male frogs are the ones calling to attract females. So like Dr. Esther said, the frog that he showed us was male because their throat patch is this dark, almost greenish color. So it's really easy for you to identify if they're a male or a female. And I tend to find more males. And I'm not sure yet if this is because the males are traveling on the roads more. I tend to find more females on the roads and more males in the breeding ponds. One of our breeding areas it's basically a flooded field, miniature wetland thing. So what I have to do to find the frogs is I stand in the field and I listen for them. And I walk toward where I hear the frog. Now the only frogs making sound are males. So that is an inherent bias in me saying, oh, I find, over twice as many males than females. That doesn't mean there's twice as many males in the population. That means it's easier to find the males. So of this year, since I caught a lot more frogs this year, I found 108 of the 152 were males. So that is twice as many females, over twice as many. So that's another interesting thing, is finding out some populations there are not equal numbers of males and females in a population, but some there are. So that's some data I'll have to try to find more information on. And then going back to the roads, how many frogs I find on the road that are alive and just hopping across the road. This year, 48 of the 152 frogs I found were on the road. So I thought that was quite a lot of frogs, considering I spent most of my time in the breeding areas looking for frogs. But before I do that, I'm driving on the roads not only to get to the areas, but to conduct this road survey. And so I'm driving on the road very slowly, so I don't hit these guys because it's dark out, and I can see the frogs on the road, and I am also tagging those frogs. So some of the frogs that I've tagged on the road, I then found later in the breeding area. So that's also some really cool information. And it's also cool, like I said, we found a new breeding area this year that was, it was more of a flooded field, which is actually really great because the main breeding area the frogs used last year was a pond that ended up getting flooded. And now when areas are flooded that the Illinois chorus frogs and many, many other frog species use, a lot of fish will get into it, and these fish eat every single egg and tadpole they can find. And they can find a lot of eggs and tadpoles. So it's really hard for frogs to survive in areas where there's fish, which is why adding fish to ponds that normally wouldn't have fish in them is not very healthy for amphibian populations. So anyway, that breeding pond could no longer be used by Illinois chorus frogs as of April 2019. And so I'm going to interpret that the frogs were trying to find somewhere else to breed. So they found this flooded field, which I have driven by, I don't know how many times last year. But then this year I drove by and I said, hey, I think I hear a frog coming from over there. So I checked it out, and lo and behold, there were a bunch of frogs there. So that's where I caught most of my frogs this year in 2020. And it was just really exciting to find new habitat and to know that these frogs are out there looking for new habitats like the Poag Sand Prairie. I guess we talked a little bit about this site, but switching topics back to the Poag Sand Prairie, which is what we're here to talk about, guys. This, as you look out here, this was all trees. I didn't really come here last year because it was just a bunch of invasive trees, and it was so hard to get to the pond. The pond is out, I don't know if they can see me pointing, but it's out that direction where those trees are. But Heartland's Conservancy took down all of the invasive non-native trees and planted. Some of this just came up naturally, but a lot of this they planted, they seeded, they planted milkweed, which we can walk around and show you guys. So now it looks amazing. This is way better habitat for all of the animals and plants that we already talked about. So just a huge shout out to Heartland's Conservancy for doing that, because it's really important habitat for the Illinois chorus frog.
Yeah, one of the problems that the frogs face is if woody. So sand prairies need fire and disturbance so that woody species don't become established. So when you visit a healthy sand prairie, you won't see lots of trees. You'll see maybe a few scattered trees that are adapted to fire, like bur oaks and things like that. So by removing all of these Siberian elm, which is most of what this was, invasive species, you're actually removing all the root masses that are under the soil that prevent the frogs from burrowing through the sand. They can't burrow through roots. So most of the species that you see here, that they will have, because they're sand prairie species, some of them will have pretty adapted or pretty deep roots that are to droughts, dry conditions. But that's nowhere near the level of kind of roots that you would see in a tree. So they do well with these kinds of species. They don't do well with woody vegetation.
And if you guys want, we can walk around and show you the sand prairie a little bit. This is actually a trail, which I guess Lane can correct me, it's a public trail. I don't know how to pronounce this name, Tavaki Trail. So it's located in Edwardsville, and as long as you stay on the path, you are absolutely welcome to visit it and walk around. So it's a really nice area, and I've actually, this path continues up here closer to the pond, and I actually this year was walking along it, and I found a couple Illinois chorus frogs. One of them was on the path.
Oh, great.
And it was pretty cool because I was like, hey, what a coincidence, I'm walking down this path and he's just hopping along here. So another thing that's really great about this area is that Heartland's planted a bunch of milkweed, which you can see here. That's a common milkweed, and milkweed is really important for monarch butterflies. The reason is because monarch butterfly caterpillars can only eat milkweed. And there are lots of different species of milkweed. I think there's like over 30 species. Common milkweed is obviously very common, so it's one a lot of people plant. But the butterflies, when the milkweed blooms, which I think there were some that were starting to bloom over there, the butterflies love to drink the nectar. It provides a lot of nutrients for them. And then the female butterflies will lay the eggs on the milkweed. The caterpillars hatch and eat the milkweed leaves and are able to metamorphose into butterflies out of that. So that's another really cool thing about the Poag Sand Prairie, along with a lot of these other flowers. I don't know if you can see, but there are yellow flowers blooming all over here. I'm not sure exactly what it is, something in the sunflower family, but definitely something that's great for butterflies and bees. And I know we're supposed to be talking about frogs, but I can't not mention butterflies and bees and how great they are and how important it is to plant native plants in your area.
Yeah, I was looking around for some prickly pear. Maybe we'll see it as we walk along.
Yeah, we can look for some prickly pear.
Yeah, one of the really big things that surprised me about sand prairies is just how young they are. So when you think about the fact that Illinois was glaciated just 13,000 years ago, and this is created by the melting of those glaciers. It's pretty young habitat. One of the really fascinating things is that with the Illinois chorus frog and probably some other species, they originated in places like Texas and Oklahoma and western Arkansas, and they were able to migrate into Illinois during this period of time, maybe like 5,000 to 8,000 years ago, when Illinois was a lot drier and hotter than it is today. And they were able to travel up the Mississippi River and make use, the Arkansas River initially, and then up the Mississippi River to make use of those sandy type habitats. And so that's why they're here today, is that they're kind of a relic. Illinois, believe it or not, it's gotten a little bit cooler and more humid, over the last few thousand years. But they've been able to stay behind in these really hot, dry areas like sand prairies.
It's also really important to note how prairies in general, how they're very diverse. You can see there might be a patch of these yellow flowers which we talked about, and a patch of a different type of flower or even grass or milkweed or anything else. But overall, all these different plant species are intermixed with each other, and that really helps the insect and animal diversity in the area. You can see a bunch of these. I'm not sure what are these really tall guys up in here. Some of the plants are really short. It's just really great how there's a mix of diverse plant species in the area.
And in a healthy sand prairie, you'll see large open areas. So where there aren't plants, you'll have some topographical relief too. As the wind kind of blows the sand around, you get kind of these little small dunes and swales and things like that. And that's really important for a lot of species as well. In some cases, maybe they can hold water temporarily to provide breeding habitat over a short term, things like that. So,
Hey guys, can you hear me?
It's a really interesting place.
Hey, Katie and Dr. Essner, can you hear me right now? No. Sorry about that, guy.
There's also some other interesting things I've noticed about this place. There's kind of a unique type of wasp, a sand wasp, that I see around here periodically that you don't typically find elsewhere. And also, some really interesting wildflowers. I think it's Ohio Spiderwort. So you see Spiderwort in the sand prairie, which is pretty cool. Really, really, really pretty wildflower.
Spiderwort blooms a little bit earlier in the year though, so I think it's not mostly done. It's probably done blooming, but it's got purple flowers, so it's really pretty.
And I would imagine once Heartland starts burning this area, it's going to really be ideal habitat for Illinois chorus frogs. Right now, most of the work that's been done up to this point has been mechanical removal of woody vegetation. Species like this cedar aren't well adapted to fire, so fire will probably take that out. And again, that's a necessary tool for management. A lot of times we're trained to from commercials, from watching like Smokey Bear, we think that fire is bad, but fire is a really useful thing for prairies. You can't have prairies without fire. So hopefully at some point, we'll be able to do that type of management, and that'll really open things up for the Illinois chorus frogs in terms of, suitable habitats. Oh, there was a little lizard. Yeah, so that was one of the race runners that I mentioned. They're really fast, so you're not going to catch them on camera. But they're here, so if you want to take a nice little walk and see lizards running across the trail and maybe some snakes and frogs and things, this is a great place to do it.
Absolutely.
Oh, there's a little frog. Oh, this is a toad, probably a Fowler's toad. Little baby. So, look, again, toads are really adapted to dry conditions, so they would really like, habitat like this. So by protecting habitat, and again, this area is pretty developed all around here, we're providing, suitable habitat for a lot of different species. Even some things like toads that you would find in your backyard, they'll do really well in a place like this.
It's almost like an oasis. You've got a high diverse area in the middle of places where around here there's a lot of houses, there's some agricultural fields, and then over that way there's some warehouses that have destroyed a lot of habitat to build them. on the Poag Sand Prairie area. I'm not sure if you guys can see it very well, but it's down there, and I have found Illinois chorus frogs breeding in it, along with western chorus frogs and spring peepers and toads like the one Dr. Esther just found, and bullfrogs, which there's a place and a time for bullfrogs. If you know me, you know they're not my favorite frog, but they're here. And
they're big predators of
yeah, they like to eat other frogs, whether it's the eggs or the tadpoles or the actual adult frog. If it can fit in its mouth, it's gonna eat it. Insect, frog, mammal, anything. Bullfrog's gonna eat it. So, and you can see scattered throughout here, there's a bunch of milkweed coming up, which is excellent.
And horsetail, Epiphytum. So really interesting kind of primitive plants. So again, you see a diversity of different plant types.
Yeah, and those are more of a wet.
There's some sumac over there, which likes places like this as well. This might be the spiderwort. I'm not entirely sure, but it kind of looks like these. Could be a grass also, but they're in the lily family. So. There was also, again, one of the things with management that you have to worry about are invasive species. This is an invasive Lespedeza, and so this is the kind of thing you don't want to see in a sand prairie. So, hopefully we can start, working to remove some of this stuff.
One of the good things is that that's all I see of it, I think.
Yeah, not a lot. So
yeah,
it's important.
It's just in this area.
It's important to catch it, before it gets seed.
Absolutely. I'm confident that Heartlands is going to be able to do that, right? This trail just goes around, and I think it loops around here. Yeah, over there. So it's a really nice trail, and it's actually pretty nice out here. I was expecting it to be sweltering hot, but it's pretty nice out, and it's beautiful with the flowers that are blooming. It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Oh.
There's a lot of diversity of grassland birds as well. So if you're a birder, going down this trail, you'll see a diversity of grassland birds, sparrows, things like that as well.
I hear the birds. You guys might not be, but I can hear them, definitely.
I don't know if Dr. Essner and Katie can hear me.
Questions and answers?
Yes, we can hear you, Sarah.
Okay. Thank you. I just want to thank you guys for joining us today and giving us this tour and talking about the chorus frogs and other animals and your research there. I thought your research on the chorus frogs is fascinating, and I loved seeing the chorus frog that you brought along, Dr. Essner. He was just so interesting, so cute. I loved seeing him burrow into that sand. And so I just want to let you know how much we appreciate you guys doing this today for us. And I want to thank everyone who's joined us online today and is watching. And let you know that we are still working on restoration on the site. Like Dr. Essner, they just pointed out the Chinese bush clover, the invasive Lespedeza. So that is the money we're raising right now. That's one of the things that we'll be tackling is that Lespedeza along with the Phragmites, the non-native cane or non-native reed that is in the pond. So we are still taking donations for that. You can find more information about that on the website. And then also I wanted to let everyone know that if you want to see the site in person, you can go anytime. But if you want to help out with the restoration a little bit, help with the frog habitat, we are having a volunteer day next Friday, July 24th from 8 to 11. And you can find more information about that on our website and register if you want to come.
So I'm so sad I'm stuck in the office today and couldn't be out there with you guys. It looks beautiful. But I just want to say a huge thank you. I think